In the last session, we looked at some quick formative assessment methods, things you can do sometimes on the spur of the moment, other times with just a little bit of planning, such as the software possibilities we mentioned. But there are other formative assessment activities that take a little more time, but in turn they give you more information about what your students are learning and what they're not learning. In this session, I want to look at some ways you can have your students write as a way of demonstrating their level of understanding. Now remember, our focus here is not on things that are actually summative assessments, things like a full research paper at the end of the year or written essays on the chapter tests. These are things that take place instead. What we're looking at here are things that take place throughout the unit of study and that give you information about things you might need to address in your instruction. Now, typically, English teachers are used to this idea here of the rough draft. This is actually written formative assessment. The student has a written assignment, and the teacher gives feedback and instruction before the final grade. The intent of the feedback is for improvement, and the teacher is able to see where further instruction might be needed. If she sees that a lot of students are struggling with stating their thesis, for example, then the teacher can give instruction on that concept while the students are working on their paper. Now for these, the teacher should not be focusing on grammar and spelling and that type of thing unless your class is in grammar. Make the focus of your assessment, of your formative assessment, on the content. Remember, you're looking to see, do the students understand what you want them to learn? I'm not saying that grammar and spelling are unimportant. Students need to write properly in every subject and not just in English class. But if you're a history teacher, for example, and your students give you a rough draft of a paper, your comments should focus on the history content, less emphasis on the mechanics. And let's look at some other ways you can use writing as a formative assessment. You can have the students just write a quick informal essay on a limited topic. For example, in a class period where you've discussed the New Covenant in the book of Ezekiel, take the last 10 minutes and have the students write a paragraph summarizing in their own words what Ezekiel teaches about the New Covenant. And you take up those papers at the end of class, somewhat like an exit ticket that we mentioned in a previous lesson. Focus on the content, not the mechanics of what they wrote, and then you'll get a good picture of whether or not they understood the main points of the lesson. Related to this is having students write summaries of their work in subjects besides the humanities, that is, English, history, and Bible. We usually think about writing in the humanities courses, but it's also important that students learn to write about what they do in science labs, in math problems, and other things like that. If a student can write a coherent paragraph explaining how to do long division, for example, that student probably understands the process well. After they finish a science lab, have the students not only turn in their lab report, which might be mostly numeric or diagrams, but have them write a one-paragraph summary of what they did and what they learned in regular English sentences. Now, you may or may not grade this like you do with other formative assessment activities, but the focus here is on you determining what your students have learned and what they have not learned. Another format you can use is read, write, pair, share. Here's an example. Let's say you're in a history class. So you say, class, turn to page 147 in your history book. I want you to read the section on the Louisiana Purchase silently. Then you wait for a few minutes. Now, class, go back and read it again silently, and then wait for them to do it. Now, close your books, write a paragraph summarizing 2 of the long-term results of the Louisiana Purchase, besides just the fact that the United States got the land. I don't want this to be a list where you just say point 1 and point 2 and just write a few words. I want you to write this in a paragraph. I'll give you 3 minutes, so wait for them to do it. At the end of the 3 minutes, say, now turn to your partner and each of you read your paragraph to the other. So wait for them to do that. Now, make suggestions to each other and what each other said. Make any changes you want to in your own paragraph. Wait for them to do that. Now, Billy, what did you write? He reads what he wrote. Johnny, how about you? He reads what he wrote. Then you collect the papers of everybody to see if they understood. Now, what's happening here is this brings in the collaborative aspect of learning. Students are helping each other learn. They're bouncing their thoughts off one another. While the students are sharing with their pairs, the teacher can also go around and hear what they're saying, give suggestions, and check on their understanding. Another structure for this writing assignment is what's called the Raft Prompt. Raft stands for role, audience, format, and topic. You give them an assignment and you specify those 4 things. Now here's an example. Let's say that you're studying about metamorphosis in science class. You could say, okay, the role is butterfly. Your audience is a scientist. Your format is a journal entry. Your topic, my experience with metamorphosis. So then the students are supposed to write a journal entry from the perspective of a butterfly as if they're expecting a scientist to read it, meaning they probably use more precise scientific language describing how they experienced metamorphosis as a butterfly. Another example, role, soldier at the foot of the cross of Jesus. The audience is commanding officer. The format, an incident report. And the topic, the earthquake at the time of Jesus' death. So the students have to be able to put themselves in somebody else's position, in this case, the soldier's position, and write as if they were writing an incident report to their commanding officer about the earthquake at the time of Jesus. This is going to help them and help you see if they really understand what happened. See, this format in general, the Raft format, helps you see that, because if you can write something from a different perspective, you tend to really understand it. One thing to keep in mind here, and this is not only for these formative written assessments, but for all assignments in general, give explicit command words in your assignment so that they know exactly what they're supposed to do. For example, have them compare and contrast, or list, or summarize. See, that tells the students exactly how you want them to write. Don't use vague words such as explore or consider. Again, this is actually the way you should be doing for all of your assignments. Explore and consider don't really tell the students what you want them to do. So make it plain what you want them to do in their written assignments. So these are just some suggestions for ways you can have students use writing as formative assessments. In our next session, we're going to look at some ways to use oral language for formative assessment beyond just simple question and answer. In the meantime, if you have questions or comments, please drop me a note.